All right, we are live. All right, here we go.
Oh, and as far as the questions, if they're coming in on that side thing, I can't read them from here.
I'll get any good ones. I'll get to them. Yeah, I'll get to them. So, all right, let me just. All right, and we got our live studio audience, and here we go. Welcome in to the Bite Me podcast. John Lopez right here, Captain Dean Thomas right over in front of me. I'm going to get to that. He said something that had Scott and I, both of us, raising our eyebrows a second ago. That was quite the promise he made. So we'll have to get to that right out of the chute. Captain Scott Null joins us, and of course Collins Illick is going to join us today with some really good in-depth technical and non-technical and information purpose type conversation about rods and rod building and some of the elements that are made and some of the things that our listeners I know are going to want to listen to. Obviously TFO and other endeavors that he's got going on. So I just want to get started here, but got to remind you, of course, the Bite Me group page is 10,200 members, which is awesome. And that's popping. Also, you can subscribe to this podcast wherever you get podcasts, literally anywhere, iTunes, Spotify, and of course, Podbean, where we host it, and you can be a fan right there. Got a lot of people here on the live YouTube stream. You can subscribe to that as well. We will get to your questions and post them as they seem appropriate. Man, I'm not going to just hammer this every week, but I do want to say more than 250 RSVPs already for the Bite Me Feeding Frenzy, September 21st at Coasters. You can get all that information on the Bite Me group page. We're gonna break all kinds of records here, and it'll be a fantastic time by all. All right, so a lot of times you hear about fishing stories, right? Oh, they were going to exaggerate. It was this big. It was this wild of a story. Well, Captain Dean Thomas, and we deliberately, Dean, I deliberately didn't follow up. Okay, what happened? Because you said something that I'm like, whoa. You said it was the wildest thing. I believe you said it was the wildest.
I wasn't gonna tell you anyway. I was gonna make it late.
You said it was look. I think the direct quote, Scott, was the craziest shit I've ever seen on the water. Now that's saying something, brother.
I'm curious.
I'm excited to be here for my first show to hear this.
Yes, exactly, because this is going to be wild.
And story time is always fun here. I mean, I've heard so much that sometimes it makes hard to believe. So, and so it's kind of funny. Like, I don't know if it was a week ago or 2 weeks ago, the question came up: how much danger does somebody have to be in before you stop and help them on the water?
Oh, yeah.
We were kind of funny about, if they're just on a sandbar, you pass them by or such as that. And this was kind of an afterthought after the whole thing happened to me about how much trouble does someone have to be in. And it's kind of a long story, so I'll stick.
No, let's go, man. We're crisscross applesauce on this one. You've been on the water for 50 years.
Couple days ago, I'm out there fishing. I got a couple dads with me, a couple kids on the boat. We're running around fishing. I'm coming under the bridge near Calm Brown Harbor, and the towboat comes flying by. Wow, I got his lights on. So I backed off, slowed down. I'm like, man, this dude's got emergency somewhere. I let him pass me by. So I shortcut Stedman's, headed over to Ransom Flats, and the towboat went down the channel. And so here he comes. We coincidentally crossed paths twice. So I slowed down. The dude had the hammer down. I'm like, man, okay, somebody needs help. Let him pass me by. I cut into Ransom Flats, and we actually pull up in a spot over there by the island. We fished 15 or 20 minutes. And as I get the idea to make a move, we pick up and we're going across the flats. One of the dads that's sitting right next to me glances out there in the middle of the bay. I'm talking about as far from any shoreline that you can get to in that part of the bay. And he's like, is that a buoy out there in the water? And I looked and I was like, man, that's odd. I don't remember seeing anything floating out in this part of the bay. And I kind of saw it flopping around and moving. I looked a little closer and I said, man, looks like a bird. And then I looked again. I said, man, it's a pelican on something floating. And so I turned my boat and I veered in that direction just because we started talking about it. And as I get closer and closer, this dude stands up in the middle of the bay. It's this dude. And when we saw him, he was down like neck deep. Just his head was poking out of the water. That's why it was so hard to tell what it was. And immediately when he stands up, man, I'm scanning the horizon. I'm like, where's your boat? Where's your kayak? How did you get here? And so I pull up on him. And as I get close to him, instead of motioning for like, hey, come over here, I need some help, he just gives me a friendly wave. Hey, how you doing? And so I idled up to him. And because he didn't seem to be in stress, he didn't seem to be freaking out. I was just polite and said, hey, man, how's it going? And
hey, what's up?
kind of what's up? I mean, I was totally bewildered at that point. And so I'm like, what's going on, man? What are you doing out here? And he's like, man, I was hooked onto this giant bull red and it drugged me out here in the middle of flats. And I'm like, whoa, where did you come from? He's like, I was on that island over there. How did you get there? Oh, my friends dropped me off a couple hours ago. I was like, where's your fishing pole? Oh, man, I lost my fishing pole. And I'm like, okay. I said, well, are they coming back to get you? Do you need a ride somewhere? And he's like, yeah, man, I'd appreciate a ride. And so I was planning on picking him up and taking him back to the island that he was supposedly dropped off from.
Oh, no.
And so I'm like, where do you want to go? And he starts telling me he wanted to go to Bay Harbor, which Bay Harbor is a neighborhood right on the edge of the water in Aransas Pass that is multi-million-dollar homes. It's right on the water. And he's telling me that he's like, me and my friends rented an Airbnb and we were partying on that palapa right there by the water last night. And I know everybody who lives on that front row in Bay Harbor. They're all 80 years old. Nobody's ever partied on any of them palapas in the history of Bay Harbor. So, and then he kept telling me, he's like, there's a dock that you can drop me off at. And I said, there's no public docks at Bay Harbor. I said, if you get out there, I said, you're going to be passing through private property no matter how you get in there. But the dude, the whole thing was real sketchy because no matter what I said, he popped off with like an instant answer. But his story kept changing with everything. You know, where's your buddies? They're coming to get me. And then when we're on the boat, I'm like, if I take you back to land, I said, how are your buddies going to know where you're at? He's like, oh, I'll find them. So as we're pulling up to the Bay Harbor neighborhood, I'm still explaining to him. I was like, those are people's houses. Those are people's yards. And then he tells me, no, the house I'm staying at is on the next street. And I'm like, at this point, I just wanted him off of my boat.
Yeah.
Somewhat sketchy, but he's just seemed like a normal dude. It did not seem alarming. And whenever it started getting real I was doubting him. He was standing right next to me. And I was thinking, man, one false move and I'm going to put you right back where you came from, man. I was ready to toss this dude off of my boat. But he was standing right on the rail. It would have been very easy to put him back in the water. So through all of these stories where he can't give me a straight answer, I said, I'm going to take you to Calm Brown Harbor. He's like, okay, man, I'll take a ride to Calm Brown Harbor. So we go over there and I'm like, how are your buddies going to know where to come pick you up at? And he tells me, he's like, I got another phone in the truck. And I was like, just happened. So, because he told me he lost he lost his phone in the water, the first phone. And I was like, how are you going to contact your buddies to know where to come and get you? I got another phone in the truck. That's it. I was like, say la vie. Good luck, dude.
Yeah,
get fine. Off of my boat. I'm done with you. So drop him off, go back fishing, get done, come home, walk in the door, tell Carrie. Craziest thing I saw today. Picked up a dude in the middle of the bay. She's like, oh my God. She said, there's been a missing persons report all day that they're searching for a person that was lost in the bay. They found a boat. The person was missing. I'm like, you got to be crazy. And the dude did not tell me he came from a boat, no stress, no freaking out, no nothing. So immediately, and I didn't see any search party out there except for the towboat that was going. So the towboat, so you know that big man-made island out there in the middle of Ransom Bay from the dredge? It was just out of sight from where I was. So what ended up happening, and there's still a few holes in the story that I haven't got completely.
You think?
So Carrie calls the chief of police, and she's like, Dean just picked up the missing dude in the middle of the bay, dropped him off at Brown Harbor. They found the boat. The boat had been reported stolen from a house in Bay Harbor. And so then word travels kind of fast in a small town. So as word spread that Dean picked up the missing boater in the bay, Carrie's phone rings from another lady that lives in Bay Harbor. And she's like, I heard Dean picked up a dude in the bay today. Yes. So he is a mechanic, a somewhat well-known boat mechanic around the neighborhood. He had her boat a week ago that he was working on, called them, told them that the boat was repaired. They paid him in full over the phone, and then he never delivered their boat back to them. That boat is also still missing. They can't find the boat. Wow. So then the other boat was crashed, reported stolen, and it turns out when I dropped him off at the harbor, he went and ran into hiding. He had warrants for his arrest, armed and dangerous. And he was communicating with the police via his family. And I still don't know if he turned himself in since then, but he had warrants in Aransas County. They were looking for him. And so I talked to another dude who actually saw the boat that was wrecked. The boat was like 10 feet up on the island. It wasn't just on the bank. He said it was up, had to be going, full speed. And I don't know if he did it in the dark, did it at night. And then later I found out that he left his phone in the boat. They found the lost phone was still in the boat. So
then he just got out and was going to walk home, or what?
He was swimming. So he's going across Ransom Flats, and I'm even asking him, I'm like, where are you headed? And he tells me, man, I'm headed to Bay Harbor, to my house. And I asked him, I said, what were you going to do when you got to the channel? And he's like, I was just going to backstroke.
Oh, God.
He had an instant answer for every question. And he really didn't seem like he was tweaking on some, but obviously there was some issues. And then the other crazy thing is there's a search party out there looking for a missing person in the bay. I find the dude completely by accident, taking him to land, and nobody saw any of that.
Ransom is pretty busy.
Well, hey guys, thanks for having me
everywhere.
for my first episode. But and I haven't crossed paths with you personally, Dean. But I will say that I didn't turn myself in, and I knew I'd seen you somewhere else.
Nah, I would recognize you.
The best part about this, the whole thing is that it was Dean that did it. Like.
And I tell you what, the next time I see a bobbing item in the flats, I'm going to go very wide. I'm going around the whole damn bay.
Like we were talking about, just put those blinders on like you don't even see
a
damn thing.
Picking up nothing. I'm going around birds. I'm going to avoid buoys. I'm going to avoid any damn thing I see out there. But
I'm surprised you didn't call me and say, hey, man, I need you to interrogate this dude.
If
I would have known that they were searching for somebody, I would have before I put him in the boat, I would have been on the phone. Hey, I found the dude. And of course, if I would have known he was armed and dangerous and wanted with warrants, I would have just circled his ass until the police got there. But and then I mean, and so I got his name eventually, looked him up on Facebook. Normal, looked like a normal family man, you know, wife and kids. But you know, the moral of the story is stay off the drugs, kids. Drugs are bad. The fentanyl is a dangerous drug.
And the other funny part of this for me is it would have taken Scott half a second to figure out what was really going on, and had the cops there within about 30 seconds.
Yeah.
And Dean's like, "What's going on, man? What's going on?"
I was just like, "Hey, bro, you need a ride? What's up? How is your mama?"
I know you're standing in the middle of a bay that no one ever stands in the middle of.
He had like some you know how hard it is to keep like legit shoes on in that mud? He had like slippers, like house slippers on his feet. And when he climbs in the boat, he still had those shoes on his feet. I was like, how did you do that?
Like Joey says here on
call those
Go
clues. Those were clues.
Yes, those were all clues. Like he's wearing slippers. He's going wade fishing. Yeah, I lost my rod. Well, you didn't lose your slippers. Like Joey says, there's a lot of morals to this story.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Well, you know what? We're going to have to hear more about this whole ordeal. Somebody was texting us as well that they read about somebody joyriding somebody else's boat on the Sea Tow Facebook page and was wondering about it as well. Well, there's your answer.
There it is.
Yeah.
There's your
That
answer.
might be a part of the same story.
Yeah. Well, again, we're probably going to circle back to this several times over the course of the next few weeks.
Yeah. I mean, I want to find out if the cops actually got him. I want to know what the warrants were for. Did the missing boat ever get returned? There's a lot of
Stay tuned.
Do you want the boat back?
Yeah. Do you want the boat back? Yeah, exactly. That voice you heard, if you didn't listen at the beginning, it's Collins Illick, and let's get right into that right now with Scott and Collins coming up on the podcast. This is going to be a great podcast, man. I mean, I had about a 15 or so minute sit down with Mark Nichols, and you know Mark Nichols from DOA Allures. He's a founder, but beyond that, and Scott, you can correct me on this. I said at least, and I think it's a lot more. This dude has caught at least 100 30-inch plus trout, dozens of 9 and 10 plus pound trout, and we're going to have a big trout discussion with Mark. And he gets a little bit sort of, I don't know if it's embarrassed, he doesn't want to come across bragging or whatever, but before we get to Collins, I mean, we're going to have that discussion here in just a bit. But if you want to know about big trout, you fished with him a lot, you know him. I mean, this is the dude, right?
Yeah, I've talked to him a good bit, and hell, I stayed at his house a couple of years ago for a few days, and I just asked him one night while we were having a few beers, and how many big trout have you caught? And he goes, "What do you call big?" I said, 30 inches. He goes, "I don't know." I said, 10? He started laughing. I said, 50? He laughed again. I said, 100? He goes, "Getting closer."
It's crazy.
And there's no telling how many. I mean, that area that he's in over there in South Florida used to be known for huge trout. You know, the water quality issues and stuff now.
Yeah.
Not as well known, but the Indian River on down south where he is, he had told me at one point years ago, he said, "Just come on down." He said, "I'll put you on a 30-inch trout."
Oh, okay.
I know one's hanging out. He said, "There's one hanging out next to this buoy. He's been there for 2 or 3 days."
Yeah.
I'm like, I'll catch a flight tomorrow. Let's work this out.
Yeah.
He talked about 30-inch trout like we talk about a 25-inch trout.
Yeah.
I've never heard of making a reservation to catch one though.
No, that's right. I'd like a 30-inch trout to go, please. Yeah.
And if you could, a 32, I mean, I'd appreciate it if we could bump it just a little bit.
I mean, I don't want to sound greedy.
Supersize it.
Yeah. Let's
Yeah.
make that a large. Let's make that an extra large, like a McDonald's or whatever. So we're gonna have that conversation. But let's get into this right now. Scott, I'm gonna kind of toss to you here because you and I were texting, and we have a lot of great friends that are rod builders and certainly deal with fantastic rods and such. But the intricacies of it, you got the guy sitting right next to you on this. So if you can just sort of kind of lead us off with some of the bigger points that you definitely want to make here today.
This is Captain Collins Illick. He runs Sawgrass Rods up here in Dallas. I drove 6 hours this morning to bring y'all this information, and ran from a storm that's out brewing in the Gulf.
It's heading this way.
Yeah, and water was rising when I left. But I've known Collins for quite some time. He used to work with TFO designing rods over there. I was on the pro staff with them as Dean was, and we became friends over time, and we fished together and hang out together. And so I decided I'd come up here and see him at his rod building place, and I am signing on with Sawgrass Rods to supply rods for my fishing in the future. And I'm picking up some rods this week, and we spent the last 3 hours or so going over rods and actions, and my mind's spinning. This guy knows more about rods and what they do and their actions and why they're built the way that they're built. I just know how to fish them, and I don't really quite understand all the inside stuff, but he does, and that's why I wanted to sit down with him today and have him on here.
Yeah, and I should have. That's on me, by the way, Collins. I should have mentioned Sawgrass. I should have mentioned Sawgrass. I know your history, of course, but what is? Let me start right there. And Dean, feel free to jump in whenever. But we all are looking for different things as bay fishermen when we're looking at rods. Where would you start? Like for regular, I mean, pretty serious fishermen to professionals like Scott and Dean. Like where would you say is the key element? Because there are all kinds of elements, from the blanks to everything, to what the handle and what it's made of, et cetera. Where would you start?
Well, there's kind of a triad of rod performance, which is survivability, castability, and fish fighting performance. And as you go up in one, you decrease in the other. You can't, you can't make them all 100%. You can't make, it's 33, 33, 33, or 60, 20, 20, whatever it needs to be. And if I were talking to a guy that was a dedicated bay fisherman, an experienced bay fisherman, what I would look for is two rods. And I would say I want a very, very sensitive contact fishing rod, and I want a rod designed for any lure with a treble hook on it. And those are two very different rods, in my opinion. And if I was a guy looking to buy my first serious rod, I would look for something like a 7-foot 3-inch rod that I felt like I could cast any contact fishing type lure with, meaning anything you want to put on a jig head, you could throw anything with a popping cork with it, and then further anything with a treble hook with it. There's jack of all trades, and then we make surgical fishing tools. And that's not we as Sawgrass, that's not we as in my personal history with other rod companies, that's we as a rod industry. So it's just a matter of how nerding out you want to get for each rod you have.
Now, when you're talking about the elements, and we always talk on this podcast, you truly get what you pay for. I mean, you truly, truly do. What about the elements involved of what you want to get to have that sensitivity, to have the ability to get it done the way you want to?
Well, I would qualify what you just said a little bit more, if that's all right, which is hopefully you get what you pay for. There are, I'm not going to disparage any companies. I'm only going to talk, if we're talking company specific, I'm only going to talk about who I represent right now. But you can look for clues to make sure that you are getting what you pay for. But Scott and I were chatting today. I mean, all we've done today is bend rods, talk about what he's looking for in rods for his personal fishing, for his customer fishing, and most important, for fishing with Camille, and the pros and cons to each one of the rods we make, each one of the series we make. And he brought up, like, well, how do you evaluate price versus performance on fishing rods? And anecdotally, we looked at something, and
it was very interesting. I mean, very telling. I said,
Mhm.
what's the difference between a really expensive rod? You know, I get people all the time. Why should I spend that much money on a rod? What makes the difference in a 200 rod versus a $500 rod?
Yeah.
One of the things
He had these bags sitting here.
one of the things is
And
what you hang on the blank. Okay. So the mantra that I was taught by Gary Loomis was my mentor is that weight is a deterrent to performance. So anywhere you can cut weight without sacrificing survivability, you're going to increase sensitivity, you're going to increase your casting distance, kind of that triad we talked about. This is a very expensive bag, a very, very high quality, traditional, call them SIC. It's actually not an SIC, but that's what most people be familiar with. This is a traditional guide train. This is a $34,000 bag of guides.
hold on. For those who are listening, it's just slightly bigger than a grocery bag. Am I right?
It's
I got a good analogy for you on this one. That's about
Yeah.
a basketball.
it's
How about
maybe-
basketball?
What are y'all making them out of
This
gold
will make-
doubloons nowadays?
This will make about 100 more rods than that will. That's an $80,000 bag of guides.
And
This
it's
So how
got,
many and how many rods are you talking about?
In my left hand, I can make between 700 and 800 rods, depending on specific configurations. That one's about 600.
And so that's like the complete set from the big eyes to the tip.
That's what we call them, is the big eyes to the tip. And we've got 'em-
That's a
we've
technical
got
term.
everything in here from the big eye to the tip. And
Makes sense to me.
but don't tell your friend, because I'm pretty sure he would fucking. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm pretty
it's all
sure
right.
he-
It's all right.
No, we
but
live
this bag-
against
This one, 6 pounds. This one's 3.5 and makes more rods. Both of them are fancy. They're not. Neither one's.
This is the $34,000 one right here. Makes 600 rods.
It's about
and
the size.
Is a 6-pound bag. The one that made 800 rods was 3 pounds.
This is about the size of a football. That's about the
Yeah.
size of a regulation basketball when you hold it. And
Yeah.
And so, what is the alloy? What is the material?
well,
Is that proprietary information?
no, of course not. I'll tell you what.
But he's
Not
going to
a
leave you in the middle of a bay.
He sounds like he picks up all sorts of people. But
Can't leave them out there.
the basketball size bag is it's a stainless steel alloy frame with a ceramic insert. The smaller size is a nickel titanium alloy that's flexible, so people can draw conclusions and figure out what it is. We use nickel titanium that also has a liner in it as well. So some of those guides in the nickel titanium bag do have an SIC liner. But the point is that if you're truly getting what you pay for, aside from the blank, which is the heart of the rod, right? As you go from an SM standard modulus material, regardless of whether it's carbon fiber, fiberglass, whatever, as you go up in modulus, you go down in survivability, but you go up in sensitivity and you go up in cost of materials. So as you go from an SM to an IM, intermediate modulus, to an HM, the cost of your blank goes up. Where you really see the cost difference is in those guides. And I think people overlook guides, and I'm a fishing rod nerd. I have my unique skill is that I'm not a very good fisherman, but I know how to listen to very good fishermen like Scott, like Dean, and John, you're all right. And and I can take.
You've been listening to the podcast. You absolutely have been listening to the podcast.
I can take feedback and I can communicate that to engineers really, really well. That's what I do specifically. And so as you go up, you pick your blank, you pick the performance level you need of your blank, and everyone thinks, oh man, I want to get a high modulus material blank and I'll catch more fish. I'll cast further. That's true, except that it also has way less survivability. So you're picking, do you want cork with filler in it? Do you want EVA? Do you want a wind grip? Do you want a braided carbon fiber grip? Where can you save weight without diminishing survivability? And anytime you can do that, you're probably going up in cost, but you're also going up in performance.
Yeah.
Everything you hang on a blank, from the second that blank is taken off of a mandrel, you're diminishing the performance of the blank. So anything you can do, single foot guides versus double foot guides, limiting the number of thread wraps beyond the guide foot, that all those little nuances actually play into how well a rod can perform and how much a rod costs.
What's really
That's
interesting,
unbelievable. Go ahead.
I'm giving him a list of, what I do. These are the things that I throw. I have my customers throw. This is what we're fishing for. These are the conditions we're fishing for. And you can't see it on this video, but there's a whole entire wall full of rods over here.
Mhm.
And he's just walking along to these different buckets and picking up a rod and handing it to me. He said, "What do you think about that one?" And I bend it and we mess with it. And I'm like, that it's perfect.
Mhm.
So that's what you get with custom rod builders and guys like this that know it and understand it and have talked to hundreds, thousands of fishermen at fishing shows. They know what you're looking for. They know what you're trying to accomplish. And then he can put the right rod in your hand. Instead of you just going around to the fishing store and just shaking rods all the time like everybody does, which we all know that doesn't work. It doesn't mean anything.
And you can
Hey,
also
it works
tell,
for me.
this is, again, anecdotal, not to beat up on that word, but you can tell when someone's just trying to sell you a fishing rod versus when someone's trying to help you buy a fishing rod. All of our fly rods are one piece. And I get 10 calls a day about our fly rods. 4 to 12 weight, all saltwater safe. I mean, if you've ever hooked a redfish on a 4 weight, it's
Fun.
It's delightful.
Yeah,
that's
one way to put it. I thought you were going to drop another F-bomb on us.
I was going to say orgasmic, but
Yeah, that's fine. You can do that. That's fine.
The point is the people call and they ask about, you've got a saltwater 4 weight. That's so cool. Like, what? Tell me about it. How long is it going to take me to get it? And like, what kind of boat do you have? Well, I don't have a boat. Then do not buy my rod. Don't do it because you're going to break it, moving it around. You're going to be mad. You're going to call me pissed off. And obviously you can sense that with the salesman. You can sense their knowledge and you can sense their intent. And, that would be my number one piece of advice is regardless of who's riding by, ask good questions. Be prepared to ask some questions and you'll know right off the bat if that guy's there to help you or that guy's there to sell you whatever they got on the rack.
Dean, ask a good question right now on for the style of, I'm serious, like for the style of fishing that you and I do a lot of. Like, what would be the number one question that you can ask Collins?
So I do a lot of sight casting. I mean, we see the fish that
I heard you caught a big one the other day.
Yeah, be climbing in the boat with me. I seen him from a long way off. But when it comes to casting accuracy, I prefer a shorter rod because it lets you gauge where you release it. I find that a shorter rod, 6'6", 6'9", is better for accuracy. Do you agree with that?
It fundamentally doesn't matter if I agree with it because what you're describing is basic physics, right? It's the length of the lever and it has to do with angular momentum. And the shorter the lever, the more accurate it's going to be, but the less distance you're going to be able to cast. Physics doesn't care if you believe in it because it's there. Right. And you're 100% correct. So we make rods down to 6 foot 3 inch. But I mean, Scott and I we played with a bunch of 6'9" and a bunch of 6'10" rods today. And in fact, this is a good story. We had a catastrophic shipment the other day and a bunch of fly rods were broken. And
no,
it's a mess.
Hand me one of those. And so we're looking at them, we're playing with them, and thanks, Richard. And we're going to make a bunch of 7-foot fly rods out of 9-foot blanks because this is supposed to have about 2 more feet of rod on it, but we're going to put a tip top on it. It'll be a great rod for sight casting to redfish.
Right. It won't be a traditional rod.
It'll be
everybody's used to a 9-foot fly rod. That'll be a 7-foot fly rod.
I'm entirely in agreement with you, Dean, that if I was picking a rod that I was going to stand on the bow of a skiff with, I would want a shorter rod. If I was wade fishing personally me, I would want a longer rod because I'm going to be, you know, I'm further down in the water. I want to be able to make longer casts.
And we mix that up, you know, all in the same day. Some days we're drifting and we're just blind casting, and at that point, you know, you're just going for distance because you're covering as much water as possible. But then there's days when, you know, later in the day the sun comes up high and then you can actually see the fish that you're throwing at. And these, you know, whenever I have clients on the boat, these aren't people that fish 300 days a year. I mean, these are people that fish every once in a while. And I have to put a rod in their hands that is going to work for the novice. That's going to have to,
you would be talking about
that need for somebody who doesn't throw, you know, many days out of the year.
And I think that's where we get back to what we started with when you guys brought me in, which is we can have a jack of all trades rod. And if I was on my boat, and my fishing is very different than y'all's fishing because I live in North Texas, but on my boat, my clients fish 7'3" medium light or medium heavy, period, spinning. And and that to me, you know, probably for y'all's fishery, a 7'3" medium would be the jack of all trades rod. That's a rod that's very forgiving. It's very easy to load. It's got plenty of power. If they aren't comfortable, you know, flattening out their fighting angle and they want to fight it from the top half of the rod, versus that 6'3", that's that surgical instrument where it's, you know, you and Scott are going fishing and you're going to make the exact hell, you only may make 12 casts a day, but you might hook up times. And that's where that 6'3" is.
And even with sight casting, in between spotting fish, myself personally, I'm not a patient fisherman. I don't stand and just hold that rod and wait and wait and wait. Some people will stand there. I was actually having that conversation with the guy on the boat today. He's like, when it comes to sight casting, I was like, do you prefer to just hold the rod and wait and look and look? I said, well, I'm looking and looking, but in between looking, I'm still casting. I mean, I'm still firing them out there to catch something that I might not see. I'm not going to wait to see it. But to change the subject a little bit, when it comes to working a lure, say a topwater, what action? So to transfer the energy. So if you're going to stand there, I've actually done the math on this. I mean, if you're going to fish for 6 hours on the boat and you're throwing a topwater, you can average 3 to 4 casts per minute. So if you get 4 casts per minute, yeah, it's 240 roughly an hour. 6 hours, you're looking at almost 1,000 casts. So your wrist gets tired, your arms get tired. So twitching that rod, especially on your wrist, what action would you suggest for transferring that energy from the tip of the rod and getting the proper action in the lure?
First off, I need you guys to tell me if I get too nerdy about this.
This is fascinating.
Really
I actually have a follow up to what he just said. Go ahead.
What I think, and I think a lot of anglers experience this. You're asking a question about a rod, but the real question is the lure, which you answered, the line, and the rod. Because if you're fishing, you know, let's just pick mirror lures. If you're fishing a mirror lure with monofilament, you're going to want a different fishing rod than if you're fishing it with braid. And
so you're throwing a Spook Junior with 10-pound braid.
Oh man, I know exactly what rod I would fish. And I would want to fish a softer tipped rod. Technically, it would be a regressive action rod. So it would actually have no stopping point. It would just continue to bend from tip to butt, getting stiffer and more powerful as you got away from it, because the braid would provide no shock in the system. But the softer tip with the non-stretch braid allows me to work the spook very, very easily. But if I was fishing monofilament, I would want a stiffer rod because the monofilament is going to provide shock in that system. And even when I'm just working the lure, it's still going to stretch, 3%, 4%, 5%. So to get it to actually walk it, I want a faster rod. But I would say that most of your listeners are fishing fluorocarbon or braid. So I would suggest picking a slower action rod than most people buy for that type of lure fishing. Anything with a treble hook, for that matter.
And so is that going to be classified as a a medium light? Or
Well, actually, that was going to be my follow up, Dean. I'm gonna dovetail onto that.
So do you have like a medium action rod with a fast tip? Do you have a medium action rod with a slow tip? Is that a variety that's available?
Yes, is the answer. But how people talk about rods, and we have there's a blog on our website, sawgrassfishingrods.com, but I'm not here to sell our fishing rods. I'm just here to talk fishing rods. There's a blog about this, but there's 3 descriptions for how a rod bends, and that's power, action, and speed. So speed is the natural stop point in the blank. Power is what that rod appropriately wants to load under with a lure, and how much power it can apply when you're fighting a fish, and then action. So the action being stiff or soft, because you could have a medium rod that, let's say a fast rod, so it only wants to bend. The natural stop point is a quarter of the way down. It wants to bend like that. But if it was a soft fast rod, it would want to bend like that. Obviously, you could have a soft rod or a slow rod that was stiff, or a slow rod that was soft. For that topwater lure, baby spook with monofilament, I would want a fast action rod with a soft tip. That would give me plenty of protection for those treble hooks, plenty of softness to let any fish eat and naturally set the hook themselves. Versus with the fast action rod with braid, I would want a slower, softer rod than that. And that would allow me just to fish through it. The fish will naturally hook itself. It'll stay connected throughout the whole fight, and I can crank it right in. But action,
that's kind of what
are all different.
That's what I was going to say, because like what you're saying obviously is enlightening, but people tend to get in their head medium, medium light, medium heavy. I mean, that varies from company to, correct me if I'm wrong, company to company, rod to rod. I mean, I can't like just tell you, hey, Collins, I'd really like to grab me one of those medium light 6'9" or 6'10" rods. I mean, it depends on the maker, right?
Unquestionably. Yeah. Like, I mean, there's no standardization. And it is problematic industry wide. The fly fishing has done a much better job. There is for instance, a 6-weight fly line weighs 160 grains in the first 30 feet. That's what a 6-weight is intended to load under. It would be better if we did something similar to that in conventional fishing, but we never have. So yeah, you really have to, as you specialize your rods and you move away from a general purpose jack of all trades rod, you really need to be able to articulate what power, what action, what speed you're looking for, rather than saying I'm looking for a medium light, because my medium light's different than anyone else's medium light.
One of the interesting things that we've talked about today, and he mentioned in the beginning, was contact fishing versus a treble hook fishing. And so, you're trying to remain in contact with your jig, and you want to feel everything. You want to feel fish breathe on it. Mm-hmm. So you have a contact rod, totally different than your treble hook rod where you're throwing a plug. He threw something at me earlier that I hadn't really considered, but in the bass world, they call them crankbait rods. And crankbait rods are much more flexible. They give a lot. When a fish eats it, there's a shock absorbing factor there that naturally sets the hook. It just naturally sets the hook. What do we throw in corkies? Everybody wants to throw a fast action and a feel rod and all that stuff. They slam a corky. There's no feel about it. I mean, they thump. That's what everybody loves, a corky thump.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't we use a crankbait rod on a corky and have that thump set the hook on it, instead of us trying to set the hook and feel it and set the hook?
100%. You will land more fish than when you hook them like that than you would if you were trying to set the hook yourself on a fast action rod.
So he just changed my whole world on that. I was like, wait a minute, I got to try this. So next winter, I'm going to go out and play with corkies and throw me a crankbait rod and see what happens.
Well, give our listeners an example. We got thousands of people that listen to this, and I know a lot of them, the vast majority probably will throw some corkies at some point. What kind of rod specifically are you talking about? Because I know they're asking themselves that question right now, Collins. All right, I throw corkies. I'm used to just whack, trying to set the hook. What type of rod are you talking about here?
So what I fish is obviously a sawgrass. I fish a 7-foot 4-inch 4-power, which is in our hybrid scale a medium. We don't really talk about the power in our hybrid rods, but they're a 60-40 carbon fiber fiberglass bias, and all you do is fish the bait. You don't worry about anything until you're fully loaded on a fish. You'll never pull the bait. If you do it that way, you will never pull the bait away from a fish that's trying to eat it. If it misses it, it's going to keep chasing it. And once it takes it, you are going to bring it to the boat. And that would be fished with braid or fluorocarbon. Like you would want a low stretch fishing line.
We got a text from Justin.
That's funny.
These
That's a
boys,
good one.
these boys are playing chess while I play checkers. But you know, that's a good launching point. No pun intended. For my other question here, Collins. I mean, obviously, you said you're getting nerdy and you have such a passion for the business. I'm just curious to lay out for our listeners and viewers here, like, how'd you get here? Like, how did you get to this point? I know you have a long history in the industry, but to where you said, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do it this way.
Well, it wasn't for the girls or the money. I can tell you that much.
You're not a rock star.
That's the only reason we do any of this, man.
Yeah,
So
right.
I started working at an Orvis Dallas store before I could drive. And one of the guys that works at Sawgrass with me, I met him working there when I was 14. And I went to college for a couple weeks and decided that wasn't for me. And
It didn't take. It
No.
didn't take.
I gave it the best couple of weeks I could have possibly given it. I probably should have given it a little bit more time, but I just went down a fishing wormhole for a decade. And then I guided for a long time, and I decided that really wasn't for me. I was traveling. I was not anyway. I decided that wasn't for me, and I started working at a fishing store, and then I met the founder of TFO, and he took me under his wing, and then met Gary Loomis, and he took me under his wing, and I'd say now I've got a bachelor's. I don't have a master's or a PhD in fishing rods yet, but I will soon. And and it was just meeting the right guys and listening and going fishing a bunch with the right guys and listening to guys talk about fishing rods, and most importantly, listening to them talk about what they liked about a fishing rod or what they don't like about a fishing rod, and being able to translate that information to true engineers is a valuable skill. And that's kind of what I do. And I've been to rod factories in China. I've been to rod factories in Korea. I've been to rod factories, most of the rod factories in the US. And everyone is willing to listen and is willing to build the right rod if you know how to tell them what you want. And that's the deficiency a lot of anglers have.
Scott, before we let him go and get to our big trout discussion, I know we can do this some more. So I'm going to say this right up front. We're going to have you back on, whether you like it or not, Collins. But we are going to get to them. Scott, I know you've been there. You've already talked about a couple of things that were eye-opening for you, which is quite the revelation, obviously, with the experience you have. What do we need? What do we need as a walk away here from Collins that you learned today, or that you think our listeners should know?
One of the cool things we're working on right now, like he was talking about just then, talk to the angler, be the go-between between that and the engineer. We're working on a tarpon rod, and I have very specific needs for my tarpon rod. I want to be able to throw a lure like a DOA bait buster, and I want my customers to be able to throw it, which is a whole different ball game from me throwing it. As Dean knows, the difference between me throwing it and a customer throwing is a big difference. But
like you and Caleb.
I want them to be able to see a tarpon roll and throw it and get it to them quickly. And we're working on rods for that, but also they have to be able to fight a big fish. We may catch a 90-pound fish, and we may hook into a 160 or 170. So that's where that triangle comes in of we have to be able to cast it, but it also has to be able to fight a big fish. And it also has to stand up to rookie anglers who are used to catching trout and redfish out there trying to catch 100+ pound fish. So we have a couple rods over here that we've been playing with, and I think we're on the right track, and I believe we will have a very good rod here before too long. And
John, do you have since you brought up rookie anglers, do you have one more question for me? One more question for me?
absolutely.
Okay.
So,
Okay. So Scott's so hold on. Scott's a son of a bitch, first of all, because I know he told you, he put you up to all this.
No. He has no idea what I'm about to say, but I guarantee you, he's gonna laugh, and it's self-deprecating. So don't worry.
Yeah. Hey, trust me, I'm the king of that.
So Scott, and
I'm the only. By the way, Collins, I'm the only guy with enough balls, to admit that I throw popping corks, and they give me a hard time about throwing a popping cork, and everybody throws them, but I'm the only one that has self-aware enough and self-confidence enough to say, yeah, hell yeah, I throw them sometimes. So I guess I got to ask a popping cork question.
Cool thing about fishing is you're only accountable to yourself.
That's right. That's right.
So Scott and I were playing with a prototype, and we're going out there. We're casting in the parking lot, and the parking lot outside my warehouse is narrow. There's only one row of parking spots, and there's pecan trees overgrowing the other side. So you got to be. It's not the easiest casting lane, but we made a few casts, and of course Scott's casting it through a fucking screen door, and and so it's my turn to cast, and I cast a couple of really nice casts. I'm real proud of myself. I'm filming them, putting them on YouTube, all
Big,
that
huge
stuff.
topwater with no hooks on it.
Oh, okay.
I launch one, and it catches the wind, and it goes, and we can both see where it's going, and it lands right on the roof of a car.
Yeah.
And we would have gone over there and checked to make sure there wasn't a dent in it or anything like that. But sure as shit, it was the only car with a person in it. It's a wood chopper. So I mean, it weighs like 2 3/4 ounce. It's not like it's it's not a baby spook. And so there's no way this guy did. It sounded like a rifle shot. So we'll walk over there, and somehow the guy didn't notice. Like, hey man, I'm real sorry. That was me. If let's look for damage. It's like, you guys are fishing here. That's cool. Well, whatever. But that was me, and that was me being an amateur. But it was fun to work with Scott on that. So
we hit the only car that was occupied by a deaf guy.
yeah, exactly.
At least you weren't blind.
Yeah, exactly. All right,
Anyway,
man. That was. Go ahead.
Thank you all for having me.
Yeah, no, that was awesome. And
you're going to sit here, and if you
no, you're going to sit there. We're just going to be a couple more minutes, and we're definitely going to get you back on. By the way, you said you weren't here to sell stuff, but hell, I will for you. Sawgrassrods.com if I'm looking at it correctly, and you guys know the expertise that you just heard. We're going to get you back on to talk about this a little more. Right now. Like I said, this is a big show. Really good information on rods. Now, what are you going to do with those rods? You want to catch a 30-inch trout? How about we talk with someone who's caught well over 100 30-inch trout? And that's Mark Nichols and I sat down. Mark Nichols from DOA Lures. All right, boys. Time slipped by. I sent you guys so many topics, man. And we didn't get to any of them except a couple here and Dean's great story. So we are set up for next week as well. I love putting some topics in the can. But get your phones out, get your apps out. It is that time right windy. Now. It is windy to talk about what would Scott do and what would Dean do. Caleb will be back with us Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, up and down the Gulf Coast and beyond, because we have listeners all over the country. Dean, I know you've been out a lot. I saw you out there again this morning. So what's happening, and what would you recommend to our listeners if they're getting out there and they can fight some of this rain, which is going to be around, I guess, all the way through Friday morning?
Yeah, I mean, I've been going every day. It's been busy, lot of variety, everything from kid trips to some great casters standing up there for hours and hours. This week, last couple of days, crazy high tide, fishing in areas that I usually don't fish, hiding from the wind, variety of wind. Tomorrow, even a bigger variety of weather. I mean, it's got a big question mark on it. Canceled tomorrow, already canceled Thursday due to the weather. But after that, man, it should be great again. I mean, this is going to pass us by. It's not that dramatic. We're going to be left with a lot of high water for a couple of days after this little tropical thing passes us by. The tropical stuff does wonders at this time of year. The water's hot. It kind of feels stagnant. This pushes a pulse of amazing blue, crystal clear Gulf water into the bays. It runs back out pretty quick. It brings a lot of fish with it. It brings bait, the kingfish, the jetties. These things push a bunch of those in. Bait fish, seaweed comes with it. With the seaweed comes fish.
How about that?
So, yeah. So, I mean, it's all good. It's a temporary setback for a couple of days with the bad weather, but this only makes things better for us.
Scott, go ahead.
Been drifting, throwing top waters. The top water action's been amazing. Hasn't been fast and furious. The fish are still very much scattered out, but they've been in a decent mood. Today, though, was tough, man. I mean, we casted a lot. We had follows. We sight casted the fish that would not hit. We started out with like 40-mile-an-hour gusts, and then it went to 0, and then from the south. And then as we were coming in, the tropical, you could tell the tropical thing is spinning. It went to the east and almost to the northeast when we were done. So the winds are really starting to shift around for the next couple of days.
Scott, I know you're, as far as weather and such, it's pretty similar where you are, but the tides are pretty ridiculous. And my app, I could be wrong, actually has the rain getting here a little later than expected. So maybe it'll kind of inch into Friday, a little bit with some dicey weather.
And I've seen estimates from 6 inches to 18 inches where I'm at. I saw one that was 22 inches. I have no idea what the hell's going to happen.
Yeah.
It's going to rain. But,
That's right.
The only thing you can believe is what you got in your hand.
Yep.
Is the radar.
I'm looking at the radar. It ain't rained yet. I mean, we've had
but it's like Scott said, how many people have you listened to that have gave you a different opinion? Yeah. And I sit there and look at my radar and it's like, what the hell are you guys looking at?
That's bad. But go ahead, finish, Scott.
The tide is definitely up. This past week, it fell out for a couple of days. And I had one of my good longtime customers out fly fishing, and we had a day, man. We saw tons of fish. All those fish have been talking about that are back in the flooded mangroves. They all had to come out and visit. And they all had to come out and play. And we saw tons and tons of fish, had lots and lots of shots. Hooked quite a few, got some to the boat. Just had a really, really good day. That was what I was waiting for, was that tide to drop, because I could see those fish and hear them back in the mangroves playing around, feeding every day, but there was just no way to fish them. You can't get in there and do anything with them. But this high tide now has pushed them back in there again, along with all the bait and everything. So till this tide falls out, I'm going to have to fish behind the mangroves if it'll get high enough. Looking at it right now, if I was out on the water today and it wasn't as windy as it is, I'd be behind the mangroves on what's normally a sand flat that is now covered in water. Those fish will get all the way past all that. This coming week, I really don't know exactly what to expect. There's so many different forecasts. It's going to be a wait and see. It may turn out just fine on the weekend. Mutual friend of Collins and I is Banning. I've talked about him on here before. He's a sales rep, a bunch of fly fishing stuff. He and I are supposed to fish along with Kerry Marcus, which you know Kerry.
Oh yeah, Uncle Kerry.
Uncle Kerry. The three of us are supposed to fish the Galveston Classic out of Harbor Walk this coming weekend.
You guys. On you guys.
It'll be a fly fishing thing, and a fly fishing. It's supposed to be a fun tournament. There's like 50 boats involved in it, and so I got to go back and relearn Galveston again and try to.
I think that's like riding a bike.
I don't know, man. I've lost everything. I don't remember Galveston. But I got to go back there and figure it out.
He's already sandbagging, Dean. He's already sandbagging because he knows all the competitors are listening.
Cool
I don't know if I can find any fish in Galveston. I don't know.
Can't find Galveston. I mean, I don't know.
You may go
coolest
sing
part is
that
Danny-
song to somebody else.
Yeah,
Danny told
yeah.
me it don't matter how many fish we catch. We're just gonna go have fun.
Oh, come
So,
on.
That'll be fun. But the best part is, as Collins here knows, Kerry Marcus can
Yeah.
talk crap with the best of them. The absolute
Oh,
best.
I know that. I know
Oh,
that.
That's fishing with a Hall of Famer too.
He is a Hall of Famer on the crap talking, on the fishing, on everything. And we're going to put him on a boat with Banning, and he will be giving Banning hell. And I'm going to stand back there on the platform and egg him on.
And it's scary. You guys might fish triple tail all day.
Oh, we
We
might
never look for a redfish.
we might not even look for a redfish. It's a redfish tournament. We may not even go look for it. We might go catch trout. Who
There
the
we go.
hell-
There we go.
I guarantee you that we will have fun.
Yeah,
So we'll
I
figure
know
it
that.
out. I mean,
I know
I'll
that's
find
good.
Galveston again, and we'll wander around and we'll poke around. We'll see what we can find. I'm
Yeah.
guessing the tides will be down by then. I don't know. Supposedly, there's another one of these systems forming up right behind.
Yeah,
this
but it's a
one.
little further. It's a little further east, I think. Yeah,
Hell,
yeah.
I don't know. I
but
hadn't been
that
paying-
doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, this is
Yeah.
this weekend as far as a what would Scott do, I'm going to go do that. But if I was staying in Port O'Connor, I just kind of watch the weather and play it by ear. If the tide stays up real high, I'd either fish deep, or if the wind would die, I'd go fish the jetties because it's going to push a lot of good water in there. If the tide
Yeah.
stays up and it's windy, I'm going to go way the hell in the back lakes, and I'm going to disappear and try to get away from all the wind as best I can.
Yeah. All right, boys. That was fantastic. Probably went a little long today, but well worth it. And we're gonna get everybody taken care of on that for sure. Thanks, of course, to Mark Nichols and that great conversation. Thanks to Collins Illick, of course, Sawgrass Rods, even though he personally attacked me on numerous occasions. I can take it. And thanks to you guys for listening. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget about the YouTube channel. And don't forget to be safe. It is a little bit dicey this weekend. Y'all have a good weekend. Catch them up. We will talk to you next time.
Don't be picking up those wading hitchhikers.